In the last episode of our podcast, episode 14, we started learning about the Goddess Brigid, or Brigid. And Brigid was part of every aspect of Celtic life in the ancient times. And one of the things that she oversaw was the womanly arts. And that was everything that had to do with healing and crafting and storytelling and fertility, the hearth or the home. In this episode, we're going to talk about womanly arts. As I was preparing for this episode, the Goddess Brigid gave me a different definition of what womanly arts is, so that we can begin to think of them differently than we have in the past, especially as patriarchy and misogyny has taught us that the womanly arts aren't valuable, that there's something to be even demeaned. So join me in this episode so that we can start healing this generational trauma of the work that we do as less than what men do and therefore less valuable. Welcome. Dancing with the Goddess is how we move through and experience life as modern mystic women. I believe anyone can be a modern mystic woman and experience awe, beauty, and magic in our daily lives. I'm Tora Arishnaimu, Goddess Mystic, author, and creative. Join me as we discover who we are meant to be, explore different modalities for self-improvement and transformation, and reawaken to our goddess magic and feminine divine selves. I invite you to dance with the goddess with me. Here's today's episode. Thinking a lot about what to talk about in this episode. I knew I wanted to talk about two of the Goddess Brigid's qualities, which were healing and crafting. But then it was like, how do I do that? And as I was considering this, I started thinking about the term that's been used with her, that she oversaw all the womanly arts. She gave me a different definition of womanly arts. We usually define womanly arts as those things that women do that aren't really necessary. They've become our hobbies, that they really don't do anything for society any longer. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Or we demean women's work as homemaking is nothing important. If you're just a homemaker, that you're not contributing to society by being a homemaker. And women have bought into this as well. This is part of our deconstruction work, is to look at the work that we do, our womanly arts. They are arts, they are skills, and see them for the value that they are. That we don't demean or devalue or diminish what we do as women in the home or what we do as women anytime. The definition that Brigid gave me for womanly arts is anything that makes life possible, comfortable, and beautiful. That's a different way of looking at it. So traditionally, when we're talking about womanly arts that the Goddess Brigid oversees and that we can connect with her through, those include anything of the hearth or the home, because in ancient times, the hearth or the fire was the central place of the home. Now it's kitchens. crafting, which is termed smith crafting as smithing and creating things on the forge with fire. And you often see the goddess Brigid pictured with an anvil and hammer in that smith crafting, like a blacksmith. For her, that was a lot of creating jewelry out of silver and gold and tin that was bringing a beauty into adorning ourselves with beauty. That was part of that womanly arts. Of course, there's inspiration and creativity with the poetry and music and storytelling, which we'll talk about in another episode. Included in the womanly arts that Brigid oversaw was agriculture, growing crops and raising livestock was a womanly art because it provided life. It made life possible. Without food, we die. Without home, without shelter, we die. Along with that, with the agriculture, was the herbal arts, because agriculture didn't just include raising crops, grain crops. That's what, when we think of agriculture, we usually think of grain crops like wheat and barley, and later corn, and raising livestock such as cattle and sheep. But agriculture includes our vegetable gardens. We need vegetables. Agriculture includes our herb gardens, which then leads to healing. The original medicine chests were herbal gardens. We needed to be healthy in order to survive. And then there were the textile arts of spinning the plant and animal fibers into yarn or thread, and then weaving that into a fabric, and then creating clothing. We need clothing to protect ourselves from the elements. So all of these things that are womanly arts, we needed for survival in ancient times. We still need them for survival in our day and age. We can't survive without food, shelter, and clothing. Those three things are basic human rights. I believe those are human rights that we need all three of those, which food includes water, to just exist as humans, just to live. In ancient times, people saw these womanly arts as extremely valuable and how women contributed to their community. So what happened? We know what happened. Patriarchy. When patriarchy rose to predominance, those things that were the womanly arts weren't seen as valuable anymore. It was men who provided the home, that built the structures of the house. They provided the income for our survival. And women's work was delegated to not much of anything. It was denigrated even. Oh, you're just a housewife. The woman's place is in the home. She's not supposed to be educated and develop her intelligence. She's supposed to, be kept barefoot and pregnant. And we're going backwards. I'm a feminist. I grew up, I'm aging myself here, I grew up watching bra burnings and the fight for women's equality in my early teenage years. I've seen the change. I've experienced the change that women have had to fight for just to have our own bank account, to buy our own cars and our own homes, have our own credit cards. I remember a time when I had to have my dad co-sign on a car loan for me because I was a woman. It wasn't because I didn't have a job and that I couldn't pay for it. It was because I was female, and therefore I had to have a male relative sign for me in order to get that car loan. All of these women's rights that we used to have once upon a time when things were a matriarchy, that we lost as patriarchy eroded everything, and then we fought tooth and nail to regain, that it's now trying to take away from us again. Oh, no, not going there. We're not doing that. That is not good for society. We've seen how it's not good for society, and for women especially. Didn't expect to go there. And this devaluing of women's work and women's contribution really hit a height at the Industrial Revolution and capitalism. Once men could create the things that women did faster, cheaper, than what we had traditionally been doing, was completely devalued and underdepreciated. It became unpaid domestic labor that we're hearing a lot about, where women were expected to work in the home. My niece has chosen to be a homemaker, to be a stay-at-home mom, which is awesome and great. It works for her. She loves doing that. And as a feminist, I support her in that choice. Feminism doesn't mean we all have to go to work. It means we have a choice in what we do with our life. For me, being a homemaker, no, didn't work for me. I've always liked working. I always needed more than that. For some women, like my niece, that's exactly what she wants to do in life. She enjoys being home with her kids. She enjoys cleaning her house and making her house a home. We forget that homemaker means transforming a house, a structure, into a home, which makes life possible, comfortable, and beautiful. That's what a home is. It's a place where our life, how we flourish as humans, is possible. A home is where we're comfortable. It's a place of beauty, or can be. And if you think about it, when you think about the women's work and women's art, part of that with the Goddess Brigid included fertility and midwifery. That's part of the home, actually, because until recently and the advent of hospitals, women gave birth in their home. And if you think about it, where does procreation usually start? Yes, there are other places. It usually starts in the home. So our home is an important place for our growth, for procreation, for birth, not only physical birth, but our birth of ourselves, of our creativity. And a home is more than the physical structure. I see a lot of TikToks where men are claiming that we wouldn't have society without them. Sorry, buds. But no, they're the ones who create homes. No, they don't. They may build the structure of the house. It is women, through our womanly arts, that we create homes, that we transform that house, that empty building, into a place of life, comfort, and beauty. It is agreed upon through the archaeological evidence that we've found that women are responsible for agriculture. Women are the ones who noticed that certain plants grew better in certain areas, and that we could take those seeds from those plants and plant them, give them water, and we didn't have to be hunter-gatherers anymore. It was women who domesticated animals. So we didn't have to hunt, that we had meat right there. So sorry, dudes. You're not responsible for civilization, women are. A knowingness of this in ancient societies, such as the ancient Celts, agriculture was seen as womanly arts, and that was something overseen by the Goddess Brigid. And with agriculture, survival was made easier. We didn't have to hunt and gather. And it's now been shown that the gathering done by women provided 80% of ancient people's diets. So women have been providing for their families since the dawn of time. It's only been since patriarchy, and especially since the Industrial Revolution, that we have men are the providers of the family. Now, women did the majority of the providing. When the men were out at war, who took care of the homes? Who fed the families? Women did. Even in today, in modern warfare, who takes care when the men are out creating violence? It's the women. With this advent of agriculture and growing our food, and even before that, but especially after agriculture, we had to preserve our food for the winter. We developed canning and salting our meat and drying our meat. We can look at this in modern days and look at home canning. Who does home canning? 90% of it's done by women. That's taking the produce from our vegetable gardens, from our orchards, and preserving it for the winter so that we can survive the winter. If we have food preserved, then if there's a famine or a drought or flooding or warfare and civil unrest or a depression, we can survive that because we have food preserved. We have food set aside. And with the current climate, I'm recording this in January of 2024, when we're having greedflation and the cost of living just skyrocketing while our wages and what we're getting paid is decreasing. And we're seeing what's going on in the Middle East and with Israel and Palestine and everything else. This could lead to another war. We're seeing the civil unrest that's happening because of the rise of Christian nationalism. So for us as women, as we're looking around this and what's going on in the world, we need to start remembering our grandmothers. Some of you would be your great-grandmothers. For me, it was my grandmother and my mother. That my mother was raised in the Depression, which meant you preserved food. You made your own clothes. You created quilts. You did those womanly arts so that your family could survive the Depression. And we can do that again. And we'll stay in with the food for just a second. One of the womanly arts that tends to discount it unless it's at a restaurant is creating meals. It's transforming those raw ingredients into a delicious, satisfying, nutritious meal. That's done in the home. Women have done that for ages. The only time it's elevated into something men will do or a man's work is when it's in a restaurant as a chef that they can charge money for. And part of why men are in that instead of women is because when restaurants were becoming a thing, women weren't allowed out of the house. They weren't allowed to be cooks. They cooked at home, but in a restaurant, in order to have a restaurant to make money from, men had to learn how to cook. And then they became chefs instead of just a cook. And therefore it became something valued and valuable. Even today, for a woman to be a chef in a fine restaurant is difficult. And she fights a lot of prejudice, even though who cooks at home? Women do. One of the things that we tend to forget in modern days, especially in this modern day now, is that one of the things of womanly arts is they're an expression of creativity. And a woman's art melded beauty with function. I have an example of that. It wasn't too long ago, within my lifetime, that the simple thing of a dish towel. So when you think of a dish towel today, what do you think of? Something like this. Terry cloth. Maybe it has some weaving on it. Maybe a pretty color. I chose a pretty red that showed up. We think of this as a dish towel. It's functional. Is it beautiful? No. It used to be, within my lifetime, that what women used was something like this. A beautifully embroidered dish towel. In fact, this is much, much bigger than what we get today. These were made out of cotton, usually a muslin. A lot of times, because especially in the Depression era, flour sacks were a cotton muslin. So women would reuse those flour sacks and make dish towels. And then men were seeing that women were using those and reusing, and we're in the Depression era still. They started, instead of just making them a white or a cream, natural bleached cotton muslin, they started to make them printed. And that's where you get the flour sack clothing or the gunny sack clothing from, is women would take those flour sacks that they get flour in, use the flour, rip out the seam, wash the fabric, and now they had fabric to make clothing and aprons and other household items, dish towels. Now it's just paper. You can't reuse that. That's one good example of how our womanly arts meld beauty with function. Another one is quilts, blankets. Today, if you want a blanket, you usually go to one of the big box stores and buy a woven blanket. It's just heavy fabric. I remember a time. I grew up in a Mormon household as well, but also my mother was a Depression era child. My grandmother was a mother in the Depression, so she had to learn how to make do with very little. When you sewed clothing, and even today I have this habit of when you sew clothing, you save your scraps. And you use those scraps to make a pieced quilt. I remember when I moved to California in the 90s and I started seeing people buying fabric for quilts. And I was like, I was totally flabbergasted. I'd never seen that. The only thing you bought fabric for a quilt for was either you might buy fabric to set your quilt blocks together or the lining. You didn't buy fabric for your quilt blocks. You used the scraps from what you'd been sewing. I have quilts to this day that my mother and my grandmother made that I can look at and I can go, oh, that's fabrics from that outfit, or I remember that. And it helps bring those memories. So a quilt was not just something to keep you warm, but it was a thing of memory, of connection. The quilt I have on my bed right now, my mother made the quilt blocks when I was 2. Shortly after, she went to college and started teaching school, and she didn't get around to putting those quilt blocks into a quilt. So when I was a teenager, I found them and I made them into a quilt. And then my grandmother came to visit and she helped me quilt it. And so did my mother. So I have 3 generations of memories in that quilt. So when I look at that quilt, when I snuggle up at night with that quilt, the energy of my grandmother and my mother is wrapping me up all night. And my mother is still alive. In a couple months, she'll be 92. She's suffering from a lot of pain. One of the things that helps her deal with her pain is to have a handiwork, some sort of handiwork to do. And she's gotten now to where about the only thing she can do is embroider. I live with my elderly parents. My dad is almost 96. So to help my mom deal with her pain, I keep her in hand projects. Right now, she is embroidering a set of quilt blocks for me. And I plan on taking those quilt blocks when she gets them done and turning them into a quilt to give to my granddaughter, so that my granddaughter can experience that love from her great-grandmother and her grandmother. And my daughter has quilts that my mother made. So using our womanly arts is a way for us to share our love and our energy with our family. It's a way of connecting ancestry even. And yet it's thought to be unworthy, undeserving, because men don't do it. And with the rise of industrialization and capitalism, which is a patriarchy construct, we have gone from things of beauty into the sterility and sameness of mass production. And we're seeing right now our clothing, mass produced, quality is going down. And there's not a whole lot of creativity in it. A plain sweater like this, I can see 10 of them. If I make my own clothing, very rarely will you find someone who chooses the same pattern, the same fabric, and the same trims. Because as you sew, you add your own creativity to it. It's like, oh, this trim will look really pretty here. Oh, I can add a little embroidery here or a decorative stitch that you don't find in mass-produced clothing. You might find it in boutique clothing and your very high-end clothing, but the mass-produced clothing for everybody, for the working person or the everyman, you don't find it, because in patriarchy, you're just producing to make money. You're not looking at it as something that provides beauty and comfort. So we see that womanly arts can be and are valuable in our lives. So how do we shift and change this perception that they aren't valuable? That what we do as women isn't valuable. Even as we've entered the workplace, our work is still, to this day, paid at least 30% or more less than men doing the exact same job with the exact same experience, and in fact, less experience. How do we change this? Because we can change this. And my sisters, it starts with us. We can't expect men to value us if we don't value ourselves. We can't expect society to value us and what we do and our contributions and our work if we don't value it. And if we don't value other women's work. The first place we start is to deconstruct this patriarchal belief that whatever a woman does is not as valuable as what a man does. And one of the places that we see this devaluation of women's work, is unfortunately in the spiritual community. Because much of this spiritual work, especially today, is done by women. Too many people expect and want it to be done for free or very little, or to pay very little for it. Think about sound healings or hands-on healings, energy healings, tarot reading, or any other sort of mediumship, spiritual coaching or life coaching, or any of those things in the spiritual world. There are a lot of people who have the belief and idea that you should not be paid for or pay for spiritual work. This is coming from patriarchy. This is a patriarchal point of view. This is not a feminine, divine point of view. This is not the goddess way. The goddess way values our work. Part of our work is our spiritual work. We need to expect to pay and be paid a fair exchange for that spiritual work. That's one of the first places to start your deconstruction and your deconditioning from patriarchy and start valuing women's work. Working with the Goddess Brigid, and one of the reasons why I'm talking about this during this lunar month, working with Brigid, is when we connect with Brigid, she helps remind us about the value of the womanly arts, the value of the arts that we do as women that create a comfortable, beautiful life. There's those three things of what womanly arts do. It makes life possible, comfortable, and beautiful. We can connect with Brigid to remember that, to begin to value what we do as a woman, our womanly arts. A lot of our womanly arts are now hobbies, especially with Etsy, now that we have a medium to sell our arts. Women are building businesses from their creativity, from doing things like embroidery and crochet and jewelry making and knitting and other fiber arts or digital art, like this digital art, and being able to make a living doing that. When we see that as valuable and we give a fair exchange for that value, then we're making a change from patriarchy. That's where it starts. And we can remember through our connection with Brigid that our womanly arts elevate those things of mass production into works of art. And as we work with the goddesses, whether that's Brigid or all the other goddesses, it helps us to awaken to, align with, and embody our own feminine divine presence, remembering that we are divine. As we do, we begin to value ourselves. We acknowledge our own value. We value our work and what we do. If we're a homemaker like my niece, we can value and see the value of what we're doing in making that home, that house, into a home, a place that our children and our friends and our partners want to be and spend time in. That's a home. That's valuable. Our domestic labor of making a house a home, of having good food to eat, of clean clothes to wear, a comfortable house to live in, that's valuable. We don't need to put ourselves down for doing that or put our sisters down for doing that. And if you're in a place like my daughter, she's a lawyer. She has a 3 and a 5-year-old. She's extremely busy. She doesn't clean. She doesn't cook. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But she is still making her house a home because she's providing that space, safe space for her children. She's providing that home for her children. Her mother-in-law is her nanny and cooks meals for her kids. Most of the time, if anybody cooks a meal besides her mother-in-law, it's her husband, which is great. She hires a housekeeper to come in every week to do the major cleaning of her home. Her time is valuable enough that she says, okay, I can afford to have someone do this so that I can spend that time that I would be cleaning with my children. As a feminist, both of those scenarios, my niece staying home and taking care of her house, being a housewife and a homemaker, is just as valuable as my daughter being a lawyer and being able to pay somebody to do that housework. It's still valuable housework that needs to be done, and she sees that it's valuable to pay somebody to do that for her. And she does pay, and she pays well. She pays the going rate. That is valuing and recognizing what we do and supporting other women. Who cleans my daughter's house is another woman. And so she is supporting that other woman's livelihood and business. Actually, a family of women that come in every week. There's like 3 or 4 of them that come in. She's supporting them in their business by hiring them in to do that house cleaning for her that she doesn't have the time or energy to do. But she still wants a clean home. And that's okay. And that's part of what we need to be doing in this shifting our perspective is supporting other women's work. And I'm guilty of this too. Patriarchy and capitalism has us convinced that it's cheaper and easier to go to a big box store and buy whatever we need or want. Most of those goods, not all of them, but most of those goods and services, and we're looking not just at goods, we're also looking at services, women provide. There are women-owned businesses that we can seek out and choose to buy from rather than the big box stores and the corporate-made products, the mass-produced products that the only people that it's really benefiting are the ones at the top, which are men. They're certainly not paying their employees a livable wage. They're not following the goddess principles of treating your employees fairly and equitably and with respect and paying them a wage. Without their employees, they would have nothing, but they forget that. And that is part of how we as women do business differently when we're aligned with our feminine divine presence, is seeing those who work for us as valuable and necessary for our business to succeed. We don't take advantage of them. And I did use the caveat when we're in our feminine divine presence. If we're still doing business from a patriarchal point of view, then not so much. The more that we do this, the more that we seek out and buy our goods and services from local women-owned businesses, we're making a change. We're starving out the capitalist machine that says you need to go to Target or Walmart to buy these mass-produced products. And like I said, I'm guilty of this too. It does take effort, but it is not impossible. One of my dreams and goals for the Dancing with the Goddess sisterhood is not only building that community of support, emotional and spiritual support for women, but building that economic support where we have a place where we can connect and buy and support other women's businesses, that we can buy from other women, that we can get our services from other women. That's one of the things I see really clearly of where Dancing with the Goddess sisterhood can grow to, is having this marketplace where we go to first to seek out where to find the products and services that we need and that we want. If we don't sew or do a handcraft and we still love that look, that we can go to a woman who is doing that and loves to do that and is providing that. And we're supporting her in that business. That we're supporting women who are making candles. We're supporting women who are making digital products that make our home more beautiful. We, my sisters, are the change that we've been looking for. We can return to remembering that the womanly arts make life possible, comfortable, and beautiful, and that we can shift the sterility that has come from the patriarchy's industrialization and capitalism, that we can return to supporting our sisters in their womanly arts and their creativity. When we do, women's wealth, and when women have wealth, is completely different than when men have wealth. It's been shown over and over and over again through studies and through practical life experience that when women have wealth and they are in their feminine divine presence, we share our wealth. Our wealth is used for the betterment of our families and our community. Women, unless we are still in the patriarchy conditioning, women don't tend to hoard their wealth. We make our communities stronger with our wealth. So we need to be supporting more women with our dollars so that that happens. We can vote with our dollars. We can rebuild our economy through how we choose to spend our dollars. We can either go to a big box store and support a mega corporation, or we can go to a locally owned, especially a woman-owned business, and support the economy that way. The second one is going to build the economy. It's going to change a person's life. You going to a local store can mean the difference whether that business owner's family eats that night or not. Whereas if you go to a big box store, the only difference it really makes is how much value the corporation has, because we know those big box stores are underpaying their employees. It would be supporting the economy if they were actually paying their employees fairly. And that's one of my soapboxes. And hills that I will die on is that we need to empower women, and women need to be stronger entrepreneurs, because that is how we empower each other. When we begin to value ourselves and our work, we begin to value other women's work and other women. When we do that, that's where change will happen. That is when men will start to value us. And if they don't, so what? Let them have their whatever. The men who do value us will enjoy our presence and enjoy our womanly arts and enjoy a life that is much more comfortable and beautiful and loving than the sterility of their patriarchy mass-produced products. I invite you to this week. Start small, but seek out a woman-owned business to make whatever your purchase is this week. Rather than taking the easy way out and going on Amazon, seek out that woman's website and order it directly from her instead. So don't take the easy way out. And I'm going to do this too. When you need to make a purchase, think about where else you can do that other than from a big corporation like Amazon, Walmart, Target, etc. Because when we do, we're supporting our sisters. And when you really think about deconstructing the patriarchy from your spirituality and thinking that you shouldn't be paid for or shouldn't pay for spiritual work that you have done for you or spiritual work that you do. We need to end that cycle. As we make these changes and start supporting women, paying fairly for their services and products, when we start embodying our feminine divine presence and recognizing and acknowledging our own value and the value of other women, we create change. We can make the world a better place. When we do these things, we are healing generational trauma, thousands of years of trauma, of women being devalued, our womanly arts being devalued. Let's change this. Let's start valuing them again and healing that trauma. And if you feel drawn to be doing work around that, healing and transformational work, what the work you do for yourself, you are doing for your ancestors, and you are doing that for your progeny, for your daughters, for your granddaughters, your great-granddaughters. And with that, we are complete. May you dance with Brigid and rediscover the joy that comes from our womanly arts that make life possible, comfortable, and beautiful. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode and it deepened your dance with the goddess. Please subscribe to our channel, like and share the video, and feel free to comment. This helps more women find our show. To support the show, please donate to buymeacoffee.com DWG Pod. Your donations help support the cost of hosting, editing, and production of the podcast. We appreciate your support. May the rest of your day be amazing, and may you dance with the goddess in love and joy.